Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. This is one of those series that's been on my radar pretty much since it first aired. I didn't actually know that much about it before I started it, but I've seen the name referenced a lot over the years. It's always especially satisfying to be able to check a show off my list whenever that's the case. Plastic Memories introduces us to a boy named Tsukasa who's recently graduated high school. Unfortunately, an illness caused him to miss his college entrance exams, leaving his future a little up in the air. Luckily for Tsukasa, he's got connections. His dad is old friends with the head of the Scion Artificial Intelligence Corporation, a company known for its giftias, or high-tech androids. In this case, they're high-tech in the sense that they're almost indistinguishable from human beings, each with a unique personality. A Giftia's primary purpose is companionship, and before you jump to all the same conclusions I did, Plastic Memories is definitely on the wholesome side. It's not all lonely, middle-aged men with their young robot girlfriends. In fact, almost all of the clients we meet over the course of the series have a parent-child type of relationship with their Giftia. But we'll get to that. Tsukasa is assigned to the Terminal Service Department, which handles the termination of contracts and the retrieval of the Giftias involved. A Giftia's operating system can only run for a little over 9 years. After that, they start to break down, the memories they've stored up over that time slowly eroding. That part is understandably heartbreaking for their human companions, but there's a bigger threat if they're not retrieved and shut down in a timely manner. A Giftia who's left to deteriorate too long becomes what's known as a wanderer. At this stage, they lose not only their personality and ability to reason, but also all the limiters that make them seem so human. So, to avoid having a bunch of mindless robots wreaking havoc on the city, human Giftia retrieval pairs take them back, shut them down, and though we don't see much of this side of the job, the Giftia is then repurposed somehow, given a new operating system to form new memories for the next 9 years. Tsukasa gets settled into this new job and is teamed up with a Giftia named Isla, who's notable for several reasons. Isla was the kind of character who didn't quite add up for me at first. All the other employees are quick to tell Tsukasa that she's the expert around here, that she's been doing this for a long time. But they also kind of treat her with kid gloves. Everyone's very protective of her, and Isla herself seemed like more of an amateur than Tsukasa a lot of the time. She tended to be nervous and clumsy in the field, and outside of work she was stiff and mechanical. If they didn't tell you outright, it would be hard to determine which characters were human and which were Giftia. Isla was the only one who seemed like a robot. But the longer their partnership goes on, the clearer it becomes to Tsukasa that her robotic affect is a little put on, a defense mechanism of sorts. Isla used to be partnered with Kazuki, his supervisor. Kazuki is aggressive and more than a little intimidating, but she's also credited with changing the way things are run around here. This office is the only one that goes to such trouble to spend time with their clients and make the emotional part of the separation as smooth as possible. Everywhere else, it's treated like a simple business transaction. No one is more protective of Isla than Kazuki, and years of tearing apart loved ones started to really take its toll on her. So after a particularly rough assignment, she broke off their partnership, and Isla hasn't had any direct contact with their clients since, until now. Tsukasa's dedicated to making this second chance he got work, which means doing whatever he has to make this partnership work. Just as Kazuki had hoped, he starts to bring Isla out of her shell, but her plan works too well. It's not long before Tsukasa starts to fall in love with her, and Kazuki has to warn him that Isla's own retrieval date has already been set. She only has about 90 days left to live. Plastic Memories was one of those shows that really tested my objectivity. It was good, but I didn't love it, and I struggled a bit to determine whether that was due to actual flaws in the storytelling, or whether it just wasn't the story I'd wanted to see. So I broke it down into smaller pieces, looking at the characters first. As far as casts of co-workers go, the group of employees at Terminal Service 1 were fine. Only a few had enough charm or personality to really stand out. I wouldn't say this felt particularly detrimental to my enjoyment throughout, but I have definitely seen stronger ensemble casts. The one time I did feel that loss was during the little farewell party for Isla. There was a distinct lack of warm fuzziness for me, as I realized there were a couple characters whose names I couldn't even remember. They'd had so little presence in the story. But Isla and Tsukasa were our stars, which is why it pains me a little to say Tsukasa was also kind of just okay as far as main protagonists go. He was perfectly mild. There wasn't anything unlikable about him, there just wasn't much to him in general. He was dedicated and hardworking and pleasant, and just a little dull. He had one conversation with Isla that I really wished they'd expanded on. She questions why he keeps trying so hard, specifically why he makes such an effort to keep smiling when things aren't going well, and he gives the impression that he has a history of striking out when it really matters. Like being struck down by appendicitis the day of his college entrance exams. I really wish they'd embraced more of a theme throughout of Tsukasa feeling like he needed to prove himself. It's there a little bit, but there's no hunger to him, no edge. After a while, it started to feel less like Tsukasa was a character himself, and more like he existed just to be a vessel for Isla's story. Which I'm happy to say is a strong story. The very first seconds of the anime are Tsukasa wondering how he would choose to live, how he would handle it, if he knew his life had a predetermined time limit. And I mean, that's about as impactful an introduction as I've ever seen. Definitely grabbed me right away. But certain things about this story surprised me throughout. They never say outright that Giftias are programmed without a fear of death, but all the ones we meet are almost disturbingly at peace with being shut down. Isla seems to be the only one having these depressing, existential thoughts about how it might not be worth getting close to anyone when you know you'll be leaving them soon. It's almost impossible to go wrong when that's the core of your story. Which brings us to execution. This is where it really came down to plastic memories just not being the version of itself that I wanted to see. I was pretty critical of the romance. I have a really low tolerance for romantic drama. You have to play your cards really carefully. The second I get a hint of emotional manipulation, it tends to sour the whole experience for me. So no, I didn't feel much of anything for Tsukasa getting his heart broken after choosing to go all in on this relationship with Isla when he knew full well what their time limit was. Her side of that story was strong. He existed because she needed someone to play off of to achieve the personal growth the writers were looking for. In the interest of fairness, I can't say the romance was an objectively bad choice, as much as it seems to go against all logic and self-preservation on Tsukasa's part. If I had to pick one overall theme for this story, it's about living your life to the fullest, making the most of each day. It's about your life overall being better for going all in on the happier moments, even if that increases the potency of the losses you suffer too. I can't say the romance wasn't on brand, I guess. It just so wasn't what I wanted to see once I saw the setup for this tale. All the ingredients were there for them to do so much more with this story. Even early into the series, there are whole episodes that have the feel of a romantic comedy that I just wish they'd spent on something else. What stands out the most is definitely the little story arc they introduced in the middle. Apparently there's a black market for the retrieval of Giftia. We get the drama of one of our clients being tricked by a fake terminal service worker, our characters having to rush into their base at the last minute just as the Giftia in question is starting to lose her mind. And they save the day and the Giftia is retrieved, but there's absolutely no follow-up on this black market operation. No exploration of what their motives are. They certainly didn't showcase any ability to control a Giftia who's going rogue. The whole storyline just felt like a half-formed thought, but the existence of an organization like this holds too much of a threat to this world to be written off as a side plot. In general, there was so much about this world that I wanted to see explored more. Normally, I would tell you that I'm not a huge fan of episodic, character of the week type stories, but I wish we'd spent a lot more time with their clients, gotten to know a little more of their stories. What's gone on in some of these people's lives that they've bought an android to raise as their child? There was one lady I was particularly interested in learning more about. It's an unpopular option. So unpopular that Tsukasa seems shocked to hear her plans, but clients are given the option to get their same Giftia back, just with a new operating system. They can't restore the memories, and it would form a new personality. It's really just the same outer shell. But this particular client has raised her Giftia across several operating systems. She delights in getting to explore who her child turns out to be each time. On the surface, that's super wholesome, but it starts to have certain implications if you stop to consider that one Giftia lifespan would have eaten up a whole decade of this woman's life. To think that she's done this 3 or 4 times already. I mentioned at the beginning that plastic memories kind of dodged the obvious bullet. They didn't go the predictable route of all the clients being old neats with hand-designed robot girlfriends. In hindsight, that probably would have put a bit of a blemish on Tsukasa and Isla's relationship. But I think the existence of the Giftias for any kind of companionship role raises a lot of the same questions. How many of these clients have lost out on chances to form closer bonds with some of the people around them because they're living in a society where they can just buy a child or a lover or a best friend? Unfortunately, this series kind of goes in the opposite direction with its storytelling, really doubling down on the message that the good times spent with your Giftia are always worthwhile as long as they brought you joy in the moment. But all the ingredients were there to explore the other side of the coin too, and I fear I may have enjoyed that take on the story a little more. I've got a lot of mental shelves for how I categorize anime. Unfortunately, this one is filed away with the shows that I wanted to like more than I actually did. It wasn't really the story I'd been hoping for, and it didn't live up to its reputation for being a tearjerker for me personally. But I do think it's one of those shows that's very much a matter of taste. If you're looking for a mostly sweet, slightly tragic romance, Plastic Memories will probably be right up your alley. Thank you for watching.